If you want to hear my thoughts about Dan Campbell's bizarre coaching at the end of the first half of the NFC Championship, then head over to JJ9 News now, where we talk all things NFL all the time. New videos drop daily about the happenings in the league. And now, on with our feature presentation. Think of all the reasons why Green Bay would never host the Super Bowl. And I'm not talking about the weather. Even if it was perfectly sunny and perfectly warm and there was no snow, think of why you would never see the Super Bowl held there, despite the fact that it has an NFL team. Hotel space is super limited. There are a grand total of 4,653 hotel rooms in the city, and for a Super Bowl to be held somewhere, you need a minimum of 17,500 quality rooms. There was outrage when Jacksonville hosted Super Bowl 39 because they didn't have enough hotel rooms and had to resort to using cruise ships as temporary options. And Jacksonville had 14,000 rooms, so Green Bay would be a boatload times worse. Their airport is super small compared to other cities, with less than 100 flights per day coming in and out of the city. For some perspective, Phoenix has 1,200 flights per day, Atlanta has 2,700 flights per day, Seattle has 1,200 flights per day, and even a city like Jacksonville has triple the number of flights per day than Green Bay has. Green Bay, simply put, with its infrastructure and its population of just over 100,000 people, is way too small to host the Super Bowl, where even if it was a warm weather city, it could not be done. So now, I want you to imagine that the Super Bowl was not played in Green Bay, but instead was played in North Carolina, in a town with a population of just 49 people. Seriously, think of your average college class, and imagine that more people are in that class than in an entire town, and that a town featuring less than 50 people gets to host the Super Bowl. A town with the population 2,000 times less than Green Bay, as in the smallest city already to house an NFL team. A town with the population nearly 13,000 times less than Las Vegas, and a town with the population 77,000 times less than Los Angeles, somehow hosting the biggest spectacle in American sports, and hosting the big game. Well, at Super Bowl XIX, that's what one North Carolina town decided to try. And what started off as a highly ambitious, but highly improbable plan for, well, obvious reasons, took on a mind of its own, and got a response that not even the town itself saw coming. Because this is the story behind Super Bowl XIX, and a town called Spivey Corner, North Carolina, in what has to be, without a doubt, the strangest Super Bowl host of all time. Before I talk about the actual bid in question and the town and why exactly the town did this, we need some context to understand what the game plan for the NFL initially was. The year is 1982, and it's time for the NFL to announce the site for Super Bowl XIX, as in this game right here. That game was taking place in January of 1985, so naturally, cities needed time to get their ducks in order and need years to make sure that everything is good for the game, so the decision has to be announced a few years in advance. And for this Super Bowl, the bidding was going to be intense, with 10 different cities vying for the right to host the game. Those cities included 3 California cities in Anaheim, Pasadena, and San Francisco, 3 Florida cities in Miami, Tampa Bay, and Jacksonville, even though Jacksonville did not have a team, and 4 others, including Detroit, Houston, New Orleans, and Seattle. It was a mix of northern cities and southern cities, a mix of domes and outdoor venues, and a mix of cities that had plenty of hosting experience and cities that had none and would be doing this for the first time. The NFL had their options to choose from. But in reality, there were 11 cities that were bidding on the game, or really, 10 cities in a town. Because down in eastern North Carolina, there was this town right here known as Spivey Corner, with a population of 49 people. For some perspective on the population of cities to host the Super Bowl, here's what the first 18 cities were, ranging from Los Angeles at Super Bowl I to Tampa, which would eventually be the site for Super Bowl XVIII. As you can clearly tell, Spivey's Corner is in a completely different stratosphere compared to the other places on the list. The population is so low that it literally does not even register on this bar graph. It's not like it stopped Spivey's Corner from bidding on things before. they sent a bid to host the 1984 Summer Olympics. But for the man in charge of the Super Bowl committee, Irvin Godwin Jr., which I'm assuming was a committee of one person, he knew that his town had what it took to host the Super Bowl. Because if there was one thing that Spivey's Corner was known for, it was big events. Every year, they held this competition right here, the National Hollering Contest. What is hollering, you may ask? Well, allow me to show you.
See the bubble boom! Come on home to the feeding room! See the bubble boom! See the bubble boom! See the bubble boom! See the bubble boom! Come on home to the feeding room! See the bubble boom! 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 See the bubble boom!
On the third Saturday in June every year, in a tradition starting in 1969 and continuing until 2015 to raise money for the volunteer fire department, folks would gather in Spivey's Corner by the thousands, with the first competition drawing 5,000 people and subsequent competitions known to draw upwards of 15,000 people. And they would just holler. Hollering was a way for farmers to message each other back in the day, especially with how big some of these farms were, and because you didn't have phones to reach out, the only way to let someone know that you needed something, or to greet your neighbors, was to yell out a holler. As six-time hollering champion Tony Peacock said on Hollerin', you didn't have a phone call to dial 911, and you didn't have a fire department or a rescue service close by. So you got out and gave a distress holler to let your neighbors know you needed help. People hollered for water when they were out in the fields. When people logged and hauled logs down to the river, they had certain hollers that they used. Safe to say, Spivey's Corner knew how to throw a big event. They were the hollering capital of the world for a reason. But the Super Bowl? Well, that's a whole different ballgame. Which raises the question, what would the game plan be for this town, Spivey's Corner, to host the Super Bowl? If they were going to host this game, what would they need to do to get ready? Well, they needed two things. They needed a stadium, and they needed hotel space. And for Irvin Godwin Jr., this wasn't an issue at all. There was no doubt in his mind that when the town submitted this bid in 1982, that it would be ready for Super Bowl XIX in 1985. No problem whatsoever. Because if Spivey's Corner got the bid, all systems would be a go to construct a state-of-the-art hotel known as the Holiday Inn, which definitely would not have resulted in any lawsuit from Holiday Inn whatsoever, and to construct a state-of-the-art dome known as the Hollerdome, which is admittedly an awesome name. One thing that Spivey's Corner had going for it was that they had the space to build this dome, as they could just plop it right over the town athletic field. An athletic field that I'm going to assume had a seating capacity of 0 was going to be replaced with a massive dome that, after the Super Bowl, would house all the professional sports teams that call Spivey's Corner home, which is none of them. But if it was hotels and stadium infrastructure that were the main issue, Godwin had a plan. Rest assured, he had a plan. Now obviously, this is a joke. No one at Spivey's Corner legitimately thought that they were going to host the Super Bowl and host this game right here, as in what would eventually become a battle between the San Francisco 49ers and the Miami Dolphins. There is no way that a town of 49 people could accommodate 100,000 people, build a massive dome stadium that would serve no purpose whatsoever afterwards, and build a hotel that would never be used afterwards. Plus, the airport situation, the road situation, it could not be done. Heck, even Godwin himself said a few months after the bid, it was just a tongue-in-cheek sort of thing. Honestly, it's a pretty funny joke. Just the idea of a town of under 50 people hosting the Super Bowl is comical. But this is where the story gets crazy. Because the NFL easily could have done nothing about this. Remember, this was the 1982 offseason that we were talking about in terms of bidding for the game. Aside from the fact that Rozelle had 10 other bids to look at, this was a tumultuous time for the league, especially with a strike looming in the distance. They had bigger things to worry about than a bid from a town of 49 people to host the Super Bowl in a state that doesn't even have an NFL team. But to the shock of everyone, Pete Rozelle himself actually responded. Seriously, Commissioner Pete Rozelle was flattered by Spivey's Corner's bid that he took the time to write a letter to Godwin. And I'm not talking about a short 2-sentence letter that had no thought into it. I mean a legitimate letter that shows that Rozelle took the time to think about the bid, even if he obviously didn't give it any serious consideration. And the letter is absolutely hysterical. Rozelle said that he gave the town great consideration, and said that he was impressed by the bid, and had no doubt that Spivey's Corner could actually pull this off. Said Rozelle, "I have been impressed with that committee's findings. The warmth and hospitality of your citizens is clear. The earlier concerns that a hamlet your size could not handle the 75,000 out-of-town Super Bowl guests have been largely erased. But there were a few concerns with the bid. Number one, even though the dome was impressive and the hotel was impressive, one of the requirements of the Super Bowl bid is that a host city have enough space to host the NFL's annual Friday night party, which accommodates 3,000 people, ranging from league officials to media members and companies that work for the league. This party alone has a guest list 60 times the size of the town's population." Said Rozelle, "There is no proper facility for the annual Friday night NFL party. The only available facility is the back room of your downtown diner. That room, at capacity, seats a cozy 30 people. If we allowed each guest to attend the party for just 1 hour, we would have to start the Friday night party sometime on Monday. Yeah, that's kind of a problem, because you can't have a 5-day party when it's only supposed to be 1 day. But I'm sure that could be fixed. I'm sure you could just build a space in the Holodome that could accommodate that. The bigger problem, in the eyes of Rozelle, there's way too much to do in Spivey's Corner that players would get distracted too easily, and it would take away from the game. Said Rozelle, there are just too many distractions and places for the players to get into trouble and break curfew. A full year of hard work and discipline could be destroyed the week before the season's most important game. Rozelle also said that if they gave the Super Bowl to Spivey's Corner, that the coaches would hate it, because coaches prefer going to cities like New Orleans, Los Angeles, and Miami, where the social scene is not nearly as hectic. In other words, Spivey's Corner could absolutely host the Super Bowl, but there's way too much to do for the players that they would never want to practice, and they would constantly violate curfew. And when Godwin got the disappointing news from the NFL that Spivey's Corner wouldn't host the Super Bowl, he was shocked. Not because he genuinely thought his town had a shot, but because he never expected a response in the first place. Said Godwin, "I'm tickled to death that Pete Rozelle even considered us. We'll just delay things for a while. Something else will come along. We never give up hope." And if you thought that was the end of it, no, not at all. Because this joke truly took on a life of its own when at Super Bowl XVII in January of 1983, so the first Super Bowl played after Spivey's Corner made their bid, NBC, the network broadcasting the game, was so fascinated by this story and thought it would be a great human interest story to fill out their 2-hour pregame show that they sent a camera crew down there to tell the story of the town that dared to dream. Godwin got a call from Ron Kershaw, a producer at NBC Sports, and Kershaw asked Godwin if he'd be interested in doing a feature story on how Spivey's Corner's residents feel about being rejected by the NFL. Godwin, without any hesitation whatsoever, accepted the offer, and the crew came in the next night to film. Unfortunately, the pregame show seems to be lost media, as even after digging high and low, I could not find the story that NBC did on Spivey's Corner, but if it exists somewhere, I would love to see it. And the town even threw their first ever Super Bowl party that year, holding a barbecue in the gym of a nearby high school so that everyone could watch the game there instead of their living room, with Godwin even jokingly saying, "We do have press packets available for those who want to come down." And 2 years after that, when Super Bowl XIX was actually played in Palo Alto instead of Spivey's Corner, ABC did a pregame segment on Spivey's Corner and how the bid took on a life of its own. By this point, the population of Spivey's Corner had tripled to 150, so the city was way more equipped than before to actually host the game. One resident said during that segment, "We thought if we didn't get the Super Bowl, we might get the Democratic Convention in 1988. And more than 4 decades later, Spivey's Corner lives on in NFL history for not just their bid to host the Super Bowl, but for the response that the town got as a result. No, they didn't host the Super Bowl, but they were put on the map, and got to be a part of the great history of this great game. Now, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but obviously, a Super Bowl at Spivey's Corner is never going to happen in our lifetime, in our kids' lifetime, in our grandkids' lifetime, in anyone's lifetime for that matter. Having said that though, can they really do a whole lot worse than some of the other cities that have hosted the Super Bowl? Super Bowl III down in Miami, there was a bomb threat at the Orange Bowl the day of the game. Super Bowl IX in New Orleans, that was played at rundown Tulane Stadium because the Superdome was not ready in time. Super Bowl XVIII, well, a guy snuck into Tampa Stadium with a gun by climbing the fence. You can learn more about that by clicking the card in the upper right corner. Super Bowl 45, the seats weren't ready at AT&T Stadium. They were not ready in the slightest bit, and because of that, 600 people got misplaced and didn't have seats for the game. Heck, even Super Bowl 19, where they got played at Palo Alto, the stadium was awful. The stadium had wooden bleachers that gave people splinters. Like, could Spivey's Corner really do worse? Maybe not. Spivey's Corner has a population today of 335, nearly 7 times what it was back in 1982. Even despite the huge population boom, yeah, the 519th largest city in North Carolina by population is not getting a Super Bowl anytime soon. But still, this town that dared to dream made itself a part of the big game and the lore in a way that no one could have possibly imagined. Before 1982, people either never heard of Spivey's Corner or only knew the town for their annual hollering contest. But afterwards, based on the response they got and the coverage they got from multiple networks over the course of multiple years and multiple Super Bowls, the country knew them as the town that almost got to host the Super Bowl. A small town with big dreams. Get your official Jaguar Gear 9 merchandise by going to jj9shop.com, and be sure to like and subscribe, as it really helps the channel out a lot. Join me every Wednesday night where we'll play NFL Trivia for cash prizes at 9 p.m. Eastern over on Twitch. To learn more about the history of college football, subscribe to Jaguar Gator 8. To learn more about the history of Major League Baseball, subscribe to Jaguar Gator 7. Also, special thanks to all of our Patreon supporters for helping out the channel. Your support is greatly appreciated. See how you can become a patron and request future video topics in the description below.